After the example of Mimosa pudica of growth-independent movement, let's see some other examples of growth-independent movements. Now we will be talking about those plants where there will be no growth on stimulus. And the best example for this type of movement is lotus. We all have seen lotus. When does lotus bloom? Lotus blooms in light, in pure sunlight. Let's see this. When the sunlight falls on the lotus plant blooms, which means the cells swell. Here, stimulus is sunlight and response is opening of the lotus petals in the morning. There is no growth present in the plant, but there is movement. So it is a best example of growth independent movement. But there is one more plant which act like this, but in opposite manner. I guess you have guessed it too. This is tuberose. Yes, it's also known as Rajnigandha. Tuberose plant. It blooms in night because when light falls on these petals, the cells don't swell up. But in the absence of light, yes, these cells swells up and they open. So stimulus here is absent of light. And what is the response? Again the same, the opening of the petals at night. In both the cases, the first one lotus, the second one tuberose. In the first one, the response is opening in the morning, and the second one, the response is opening at night. In both the cases, there is no growth, but there is pure, complete movement. This is example of growth-independent movement, but I have more for you. Now, I'm going to tell you one more plant, which is a very famous and a very dangerous plant. The carnivorous plant. Plants which can eat insects. Yes. Have you ever heard the plant which is Drosera? A very dangerous plant. Not for us, but yes, for insects. Because these plants, they curl inwards and traps the whole insect inside when there is a stimulus of touch to them. Let's see this dangerous plant which traps the insect and digests it out. Yes, this is the plant. You can see as soon as the insect touched the plant, the Drosera curl inwards to trap the insect and digest it. Stimulus is touch of an insect, and the response is trapping the insect inward by curling the leaves. This is again a good example of growth independent, because here also there is stimulus, but in response of the stimulus there is no growth. Now let me show you one more plant like this, a very famous and dangerous carnivorous plant which most of you have heard. The plant is Venus fly trap. Yes, the name itself says it can trap the fly. Not only flies, it can trap a frog also. Yes, let's see this plant. Venus fly trap, a plant which looks and smells like a flower to the insects. But when they come near to it, thinking it's a flower, it traps it. And as soon as it traps it, it digests it. It takes all the nitrogen from the insects, from the animal. Let me show you this plant. Oh, this is the plant. You can see clearly there are some hairs inside the plant. As soon as the hairs are touched, it traps the insect inside. Stimulus is touch of an insect to trigger the hair. As soon as the hair is triggered, the cells, they shrink and they close. And as soon as they close, the insect is trapped. the Venus flytrap shuts and digests the insect and absorb all the nitrogen from the insect. Most of the carnivorous plants, they trap the animals, they trap the insects to absorb the nitrogen from the animals because they usually grow in nitrogen deficient areas. They do photosynthesis, but for nitrogen, they depend on insects and animals. So again, it's an example of growth independent movement because you can clearly see there is touch, there is movement, but there is no growth. So this is again an example of growth independent movement. And let me show you one more plant, a very beautiful, a very famous plant. The name is balsam. Yes, the fruit of balsam. Now what happens in balsam? As soon as you touch the fruit of balsam, it bursts. Yes. As soon as you touch the fruit of balsam, it bursts and its seeds comes down. Let's see. Here you can clearly see the fruit of balsam. As soon as it touching the ground, it explodes and the seeds scatter in the ground. It is falling in the ground, but if you also touch this fruit, it will burst and the seeds are scattered. So again, it's a very beautiful example of growth independent because again there is a touch, but there is no movement. There is no growth. There is movement, but there is no growth. So this is again an example of growth independent movement. So for growth independent movement, we have some good examples here. Number 1, Mimosa pudica. Number 2, lotus blooming in sunlight. Number 3, tuberose blooming in absence of light. Number 4, drosera. Number 5, Venus flytrap. And number 6, which is fruit of balsam. These all are examples of growth independent where there is no growth on stimulus.